Hello everyone, this is Jason from Shy Snake, and I wanted to talk a bit about how we use RTC in the development of our game Spy DNA. So for those who don't know the background, Spy DNA is a simulation RPG. So we put a lot of effort into making a really realistic combat system and world, and the player, as they play their way through it, will get to interact with a lot of NPCs. They'll do a lot of talking to other characters. There's a lot of different items in the game that you can experience. So we had to do a lot of creation of different items and different dialogues for the game. So I'll start with the items because those are fairly straightforward. So on the screen right now, you see we have opened this thing called Oxalana's phone. In the terms of our game, it's called an item. An item is just anything that can be inside a player's inventory. So this is all pretty basic stuff. And if I go to one of these more complex items, in this case, this is under clothing, you see it actually over here on the right has both an item, which is everything we were just talking about, but it's also got this thing called item clothing. So this is extra information for that specific type of item. In this case, it's a heavy combat suit, which provides a lot of armor to the players, and you can see where we've entered the values for different parts of the armor. Now, the way we set this up in RTC was down here in this thing called features, and also templates, but we'll talk about features first. So in the feature file, we actually created this, so we can edit a series of fields. So for those familiar with C++, this is the equivalent of variables in a class, or members in a class. And that lets you basically add things into the object. In this case, we had a different description. Those are just coming from over here. So I could drag over another text field if I wanted. And then I could set the values, whether I wanted it to be required, what I wanted to call it, if it needed a default value, for example. So this is how we set up the templates that we use inside RTC to work with our game. Now, when we start the game, we actually load from RTC this information, and we use it to populate and instance our C++ classes that represent this over on the game side. So effectively, we go up here and we do an export or quick export, where that tells RTC to write out a XML file that contains all those objects in our game. And then when you run the game, it actually loads that XML file, and that's what it uses to create all those C++ objects that the actual game engine runs and uses. The nice thing about that is we can have a very user-friendly GUI editor, and we actually pay no performance cost on the back end for having done so, because it's turned into very native C++ objects before we actually access it at runtime. So that's how we entered the items in the game. But probably the biggest advantage we got from RTC was in dialogue editing. So we had previously an in-game editor which we used to create all these items, and that actually worked pretty well for us. What didn't work so well in our world before we made the change to RTC was dialogue editing. And so I'm going to go into an example of our dialogue now. So this is an example dialogue from one of the missions that we shipped in our demo. You can see it's actually fairly complicated. I'll keep zooming out till you can see the whole thing. So each of these boxes with the portrait is representing something the player could say. You see some of these other boxes which just have an icon on them. Those are NPCs. We just haven't entered all the portraits for the NPCs, just simply because it's a little extra work to do that and wasn't really necessary. So I'll go through a bit of how this works. So when you start the dialogue with the NPCs, this line for Igor or Egolf is the first thing they say to you, and then you'll get some options to respond. But the options you have to respond will depend on a few things. And so this generates the dialogue on the screen, but we're using the RTC nodes for conditions. And in this case, we're using the built-in scripting language in RTC, but we've extended that to provide our own checks in-game. So in this case, we're checking, I'll zoom in a little so you can see it better. So first we're checking to see if the commander is a male or female character. And then down here, we're checking to see if a specific NPC is in the party. And based on the result of those checks, you can see the green or red, meaning it passed, you made the check or you did not. We go to a couple different things. In this case, if you're male, we go directly to the hub where it's basically the primary place where you start your talk. If not, you get an extra little dialogue down here where he makes some comments. And in this case, we actually are using an instruction node so that if you had this player in your party, we set a couple flags, or in this case variables, not flags, so that you get a small bonus to your negotiation. So that should give everyone an idea how we use RTC in the development of SpyDNA here at ShySnake. For those interested, take a look at spydna.com or shysnake.com and you can learn more about the game. And thanks to everyone for listening and watching.